So we have a problem we need to fix with the horizontal and vertical menu. Right now it's being shown vertical, and if I switch to horizontal, it's okay, but when I click a grouping item, we can see that the sub-items also appear vertical. But these need to appear in some kind of pop-up window right underneath this equipment item. So I made a few changes, and let's look at those quickly. First of all, I'm in PS menu item directive.js, and we had our isVertical function. Before, all this function would do is look at the controller for the menu and call the isVertical function on that. But if we're looking at one of those submenus, it's going to be a pop-up menu, that's always going to show as vertical. So what we'll do is we'll look at all of the parents for the element, and we'll check to see if we have something with the class of PS subitem section. And if this class does exist, then we know the length will be greater than 0, and we'll know we need to show it vertically. Looking at this class again, PS subitem section, if we look at the template for the group, we can see that we have a PS subitem section right here. And this is the section that's going to contain all of these subitems. They're transcluded right here in an unordered list. So again, if we have this class, we know we want to show the menu vertically, not horizontally. So I took this same change and I added it to PS menu group directive.js. We can see it right here. Another thing I changed in this file, and it only belongs to the group directive, not the item directive. But if we notice that the element has a parent of PS subitem section and the length is 0, then we want to go ahead and call this new function, scope.setSubMenuPosition. And this is what will set the position of the pop-up menu underneath its parent. This function is right below here. We grab the position of the element. Offset is a jQuery function that gives us the left and top CSS styles. And then we just look through our document. We don't need this body tag, but we look through our document for the PS sub item section, and we call the jQuery CSS function to set the left position to the element's left position plus 20, and we'll hard code the top at 36. That'll position it right under the element. There was one other change I needed to make in the group template. If we're showing the menu horizontally, we're going to want to show these sub-items vertically. And this PS pop-up menu is a new class that'll get assigned to the pop-up menu, which shows the sub-items. So let's take a look at this. I'll click on Equipment, and we get our pop-up window right underneath Equipment. And all of our sub-items are showing vertically, which is perfect. Let's just take a look at this class we're adding, PS pop-up menu. I'll go to the psmenu.css file, and you can see at the bottom I added the CSS rule for that class. The position is absolute. That's because we want to place the pop-up menu anywhere on the screen underneath its item. I'm setting the z-index to 1000. The higher the z-index number, the closer it'll appear to the viewer. So we want to make sure that this pop-up menu appears above other content in the page. And this could be a potential problem. Like, what if our widget page has something with a z-index greater than 1000? It would be good if there was a setting where the menu user could set the z-index to the highest level it needs. But for now, setting it to 1000 is fine. We also set the background color to dark gray. We set the width to 200, and we move any padding on the left side. So looking at this again, I can still click on these items, and our messaging is still happening, which is good. If I click on Equipment again, the menu disappears. That's fine. The next thing I want to fix is I want to be able to handle a click outside of the menu. Like if I click here right now next to the raf string, I would want the menu to disappear, but it doesn't. So let's handle that. So I added in the code to solve this problem. We're in PS menu group directive, and when we click on the item to open it up, we want to keep track of the scope. And we'll keep track of the scope in the controller. So I added this line right here. We're going to look in the menu controller, and we're going to call a function called setOpenMenuScope. And this way, the menu controller will always know the scope of the open pop-up menu. And because it knows the scope, it'll be able to call this scope.closeMenu function above. So that way, when we click outside of the pop-up menu, the menu controller will call this function to close it. So let's take a look at this function. I'll go to the menu controller, and right here we can see set open menu scope. We pass it the scope, and we set it to the menu controller's own scope on a property called open menu scope. If we look down a bit, we can see that when we toggle the menu orientation, if we have an open menu scope, we're going to want to call close menu at that point. But most of the processing is in this handler right here. We need to look for a click event in the entire document. So we're going to get the jQuery version of the document, and we're going to bind to the click event. So when there's a click anywhere in the entire SPA, this code will execute. So if we do have an open menu scope, we may need to close it. And this also only applies if it's horizontal, so not scope.isVertical. We're passing in the event to this function. So we're looking at the target of the event, and we're looking at the parent. And if that parent has a class of PS selectable item, that means we're actually clicking in the pop-up, so we'll just return. But if we're not clicking within the pop-up, then we need to close the menu. And we close the menu right here. We take our open menu scope and call the close menu function like we saw before. Now it's very important to wrap any kind of scope modifications within a $scope.$apply. And we only need to do this when we're working with a jQuery handler. We wouldn't need to do this if we're working with something from Angular, because Angular knows that any changes to the scope need to be applied. But because we're actually calling the bind object on a jQuery object, we need to make sure we're using $scope.$apply when we close the menu. And we also want to make sure that that click does not get passed to the open space outside of the pop-up menu that we clicked on. We do want the event to propagate here, and if this if fails, we want it to propagate. So that should be fine. I'll run this. And we have our pop-up, and I'll click outside of it, and it goes away. That's fine. Also, if we open up the pop-up and we toggle the orientation, it also goes away. And everything should still work. Rafts, paddles, and life vests. So for the most part, the entire menu seems to be working. We can access all the items. We can toggle between horizontal and vertical. So the next thing I want to do is make sure that this menu is responsive. Let's just try it out right now and see what happens. So we have somewhat of a tablet size here. Let's see what happens when I click up. That's working pretty well. When I go down to a smaller size, I'll hit refresh here. Things are looking good up on top, but our menu button isn't working, and our menu is still showing. So the next thing we'll handle in this module is getting this to work responsively.